What if the reason you're still waiting for your next promotion isn't because you're missing another certification, another year of experience, or another leadership book? What if you're actually much closer than you think? Over the past few weeks, we've talked about visibility, communication, and leadership presence. Today, I want to pull it all together because becoming impossible to overlook isn't about becoming someone else. It's about making the value you already create impossible to miss.
Welcome to Career Growth for Working Women. This show is for women who are done waiting to be noticed and ready to be compensated for the value they already bring. I'm Shannon, a promotion and compensation coach, and I help women position themselves for real advancement, not by working harder, but by showing their value more strategically using what I call the 5% method. If you're ready for clarity, confidence, and career growth that actually pays off, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Hello, welcome back to the show. I was thinking this week about how easy it is to believe your career is stuck. Not because you aren't making progress, but because progress doesn't always feel obvious while you're living it. Maybe you've had one of those moments where you look around your organization and think, how did they get there before I did? Or what am I missing? Or maybe you've asked yourself the question I hear so often from the women I coach. I know I'm capable, so why doesn't my career reflect that yet? If you've ever had that thought, I want you to know you're not alone. And more importantly, I don't think you're asking the wrong question. I just think that you've been looking in the wrong place for the answer. Over the last few months, we've had some really honest conversations together. We've talked about waiting to be noticed, about minimizing your accomplishments, about confidence, about staying behind the scenes, about feeling uncomfortable talking about your value, and showing up in the meetings. And if there's one thing I hope you've realized by now is this: none of those things have anything to do with whether you're talented enough. They have everything to do with whether your value is easy for other people to recognize. That's a very different problem. And that's good news because positioning can change. I want you to think back over the past few weeks for just a minute. Maybe you've started paying more attention to the value you create instead of just the task you complete. Maybe you've noticed yourself catching phrases like I just helped or it wasn't that big of a deal. Maybe you've walked into a meeting with one idea you wanted to contribute and you actually shared it. Maybe you started documenting your accomplishments instead of assuming you'd remember them later. These might feel like small changes, but let me tell you something. Small changes in how you position yourself create big changes in how people experience your leadership. And leadership is experienced long before it's rewarded. I think that's something we don't talk enough about. Promotion decisions are rarely happen because of one spectacular moment. They're usually the result of dozens of consistent experiences. Someone notices that you're the person who brings clarity. Someone remembers that you constantly ask thoughtful questions. Someone realizes you always seem to move projects forward. Someone begins describing you as strategic, influential, a future leader. That's how reputations are built, one interaction at a time. Which is why I never want you waiting for one big opportunity to prove yourself. Your career isn't built on one presentation, one performance review, or one promotion conversation. It's built every day. One meeting, one project, one conversation, one decision at a time. And that's encouraging because it means you don't have to change your entire career overnight. You simply have to become more intentional about the moments you're already living. One of the women I coached recently said something that made me smile. She told me, I don't think I'm working any harder than I was 6 months ago. And she paused. But people are talking about me differently. I loved that because that's exactly what we're trying to create. Not more work, but a different conversation. The work had always been there. The value had been there. The difference was that people could finally connect the dots. And that's what positioning does. It helps other people understand the impact you're already creating. And here's something I hope you'll always remember. Your goal is not to become the loudest person in the room. Your goal is not to become someone you don't recognize. Your goal isn't even to make people notice you. Your goal is to make your value obvious. Those are very different things. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions women have about visibility is that it requires becoming more self promotional. I don't believe that. I think visibility is simply making it easier for people to understand the problems you solve, the leadership you demonstrate, the relationships you build, and the outcomes you create. That's not bragging, that's clarity. And clarity creates opportunity because the people making promotion and compensation decisions can only advocate for the value they clearly understand. And that's why this matters. Not because I want you talking more about yourself, because I want the incredible work you're already doing to create the opportunity it deserves. I want to say something to the woman who's listening today and wondering if she's already waited too long. Maybe you've been in the same role for years. Maybe you've watched coworkers move ahead. Maybe you've started questioning yourself. So let me tell you something. Please don't confuse a delayed promotion with limited potential. These are not the same thing. I've seen women completely change the trajectory of their careers in less than a year, not because they suddenly became more talented, because they became more intentional. They learned how to position their value. They learned how to communicate their leadership. They learned how to become the obvious choice. And you can too, because this is learnable. That's one of the reasons I care so deeply about this work. I don't want high performing women believing they need to become someone else. I want them recognizing they already have so much of what they need. We simply need to help other people see it. And maybe before we help anyone else see it, we need to help you see it first. Because if you spent years minimizing your accomplishments, waiting to be noticed, putting everyone else's growth ahead of yours, it's understandable if you've forgotten just how much value you really create. That's why I hope these conversations have reminded you of something. You are probably much closer than you think. Closer to the promotion, closer to the raise, closer to the leadership opportunity. Not because those things are guaranteed, but because the gap may not be your capability. The gap may simply be your positioning, and positioning can change. That's hopeful, right? Because it means your future doesn't depend on becoming a completely different person. It depends on helping the right people recognize the value that's already there. I think one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves professionally is learning to see our careers more accurately. Not more critically, more accurately. Because if you're anything like the women I coach, you've spent years measuring yourself by everything you haven't done yet. The promotion you haven't received, the role you haven't applied for, the certification you don't have, the experience you think you're missing. And when that's where your attention goes, it's easy to overlook everything you've already built. But what if you measured yourself differently? What if instead of asking, what am I still missing? You started asking, what value am I already creating that deserves to be recognized? That question changes things because it shifts your focus from proving yourself to positioning yourself. And those are two very different things. I think that's one of the mindset shifts we've explored together over the past few months. You don't have to spend your career proving you're valuable. You've already been doing that. The work you've been leading, the problems you've been solving, the relationships you've been building, the people you've been developing, the clarity you've been bringing, the momentum you've been creating. That's your evidence. Now it's time to help the people making promotion and compensation decisions see it as clearly as you do. Actually, maybe even more clearly than you do. Because I've noticed something about high performing women. You normalize your excellence. What feels exceptional to someone else often feels like just another Tuesday to you. You solve a complicated problem and move right on to the next one. You help a teammate grow and barely think about it again. You improve a process that saves hours every week, and with a month, it simply becomes the new norm. That's what high performers do. But it's also why so many high performers underestimate the value they're creating. You stop seeing what's becoming ordinary to you. And if you can't see it, it's very difficult to help someone else recognize it. That's why awareness is so important. Not because awareness gets you promoted, but because awareness changes the way you communicate. And the way you communicate changes the way people experience your leadership. That's the thread that connected every conversation we've had together. Waiting to be noticed, minimizing your accomplishments, waiting to feel more confident, staying behind the scenes, holding back in meetings. None of these things were actually about confidence. They were about visibility, about positioning, about helping other people understand the leadership impact you are already creating. And that's why I believe so strongly that your career shouldn't depend on someone eventually noticing you. It should be built on helping the right people recognize your value, because those are two different strategies. One leaves your future to chance, the other puts you back in the driver's seat. So let me tell you something. If you've listened to these episodes over the last few months and thought, this sounds exactly like me, I hope you'll also hear this. You are not behind. You are not less capable than the people around you. You are not bad at playing the game. You're a high-performing woman who was probably taught that if you worked hard enough, someone would eventually notice. For some women, that happens. For many, it doesn't. Not because their work isn't worthy, because their value has remained invisible. And invisible value rarely creates visible opportunities. And that's why I care so deeply about helping women become impossible to overlook. Not because I want you to seek attention, because I want your contribution to create the opportunities it's earned. I want your work to open doors. I want your leadership to be recognized. I want your compensation to reflect the value you're creating. And I want your career to support the life you want to build, not compete with it. That's what all of this has been about. Not becoming louder, not becoming someone you're not, becoming clearer. Because clarity builds confidence. Clarity builds credibility. And clarity helps other people advocate for you when you're not even in the room. Imagine what your career could look like a year from now if people making promotion decisions consistently described you as strategic, influential, a trusted leader, someone who creates meaningful business impact. Not because you changed who you are, because you learned how to communicate who you've been all along. That's the opportunity in front of you. So, before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final small promotion move. This one, it's a little different. I want you to block 30 minutes on your calendar this week. Grab a notebook or open a document on your computer and answer these 3 questions. Number 1, what do I want to be known for? Number 2, what am I already doing that supports that reputation? And number 3, what's one thing I can start doing consistently that helps other people see it? Don't overthink it, just start. Because every promotion, every raise, every leadership opportunity starts long before someone posts a new job opening. It starts with a reputation. And the beautiful thing about your reputation is that you're shaping it every single day. One conversation at a time, one meeting at a time, one project at a time, one decision at a time. All right, one final thought. You don't become impossible to overlook by becoming someone different. You become impossible to overlook by making the value you already create impossible to miss. Because here's what I believe with my whole heart. You don't need to become more valuable. You need to help the people around you recognize the value that's already there. And when you do, you don't just change how other people see you. You change how you see yourself. Okay, I'll talk to you next time.
If today's episode sparked something for you, a question, an idea, or a realization, don't ignore it. I offer promotion strategy calls where we walk through your current role, your goals, and how to position you for your next promotion or raise without burning out or overworking. You can book that call using the link in the description. And if this episode helped you, sharing it or leaving a quick review makes a bigger difference than you know. Until next time, keep showing your value clearly. You've earned it.